Okay, so we are on mini set number 1. All right, so you can see the slide. Let me see if I can move. So the first thing is that I want to point out on this section 2 series of slides is if you look at the very upper right corner of the slide, it's going to have our 3 categories there: upright posture, spinal mobility, ambulation, and gait. And there will be a check mark to which this mini set benefits the most. So this will help you put your programming together, because if somebody walks in and they've got postural instability, all you have to do is look for all the check boxes on the 11 absolute that relate to preserving ambulation and gait. Okay, so it kind of makes it easier. All right, so let's talk for a moment about the opening stretch series. Now, in the opening stretch series, we have breathing as the first thing, and we need to understand why that is so important. So, one of the first things that when you intake a client, you're going to notice how they breathe. So, you want to take a note of how they're breathing, make kind of like a note for yourself of what you're seeing. Oopsie, I think I just lost my screen. Give me 1 second to get back to it. Um, Wait, now I completely lost everybody. Hold on. Let me share this and this.
We're still here.
Okay, yeah, I just lost my screen. There we go. Okay, so participants can see the screen, and I keep clicking something where either I don't see you or oh, here we go, view. Okay, there we go. And all right, I don't know where it is. I can't see any of you, but it's okay. If anybody has a question, just let me know. I'm just going to go ahead and talk through. So mini set number 1 is the opening stretch series, and it pertains to breathing. So right off the bat, when you very first do your assessment on your client, you kind of want to start listening to how they breathe. And right off the bat, in early stages, generally the breathing mechanism will be regular, in through the nose, out through the nose, or in through the nose, teach them out through the mouth. What you don't want to hear is in through the mouth, out through the mouth. All right. The breathing exercises are super, super relevant because they enhance oxygenation. So that's going to boost lung capacity and improve the oxygen exchange process in the body. They're going to have improved respiratory efficiency. So that's going to help them strengthen their respiratory muscles. And it supports, when you have stronger respiratory muscles, it supports more efficient breathing. Here's something interesting. It's actually going to contribute to their core stability and posture. So the more they can engage the diaphragm and the surrounding muscles to help them breathe, the more they can maintain a strong core and proper posture. It's going to help them with stress reduction, which is really important because, as you know, deep breathing activates kind of like a relaxation response or that parasympathetic response. And that's key because it will help them with their anxiety and promote calmness. And then the other thing too is it will keep them kind of like mindful of their movement. It encourages them to focus on what they're doing at that moment. And overall, that's going to contribute to better mental clarity. So the breathing is really, really key. The other thing is if they've got spinal instability, spinal asymmetry, breathing exercises could be extremely important in opening up that concave side. So if they're collapsed on one side, I would have them do lateral flexion, hold it. You could put your hand on their ribs or have them put their hand on their ribs and inhale and exhale through that side of the body. Okay, that will help a lot. We need to talk about nose breathing versus mouth breathing. So people with PD are at an increased risk of degenerated respiratory and bodily function because of the mouth breathing. So air is processed super differently when it comes through the nose versus when it comes in through the mouth. So breathing in through the nose, it's going to help them control the temperature of their body, believe it or not. And this is really important because you'll also notice that people who breathe in through their mouth, they tend to run a little colder. But more so for people with Parkinson's disease, it's difficult for them to regulate their body temperature. So helping them to continue breathing through the nose will help facilitate body temperature control, even to a tiny degree. The nose breathing filters toxins. So there are little tiny hairs in your nose called cilia, and they help to filter out toxins and debris when you breathe. And if you're breathing in through the mouth, it's all just getting inhaled into the mouth and throat. So that can start more bacteria growth and different things happening through the respiratory tract from the throat down. Breathing through the nose actually humidifies your nasal passages as you inhale the air. You will notice that people who breathe through their mouth, they will start to make a sound. Generally, their breathing will take on more sound, and their nose might feel more dry. And then the other thing about breathing through the nose is that it helps to sense smell. So it can smell harmful substances in the air or in the food. Now, this really isn't as relevant to a person who has Parkinson's disease. And that's because one of the first symptoms, a prodromal symptom of Parkinson's, is loss of smell. So most of them can't smell very well or at all to begin with. One quick anecdote, I had a client who had like three dogs, those little dogs, and they lived in the house with her, and she had a bed that was raised. And I always try to help the clients a little bit more. So I had to move the bed for her. And there was all kinds of like pee-pee accidents under the bed from the dogs, and it smelled so strong. And at first, I was aghast that this person had no clue and couldn't smell it. And then I realized she can't smell. She has no sense of smell. So, that's how extreme it can be. Mouth breathing, it dehydrates the gums and the tissues in the mouth. It can change the bacteria in the mouth. It fosters an elongated face structure, especially in children as their facial structure is developing. So if you know any little children without Parkinson's, it doesn't have to be that they have Parkinson's, but if they have difficulty breathing and they become mouth breathers, their facial structure will start to change. Droopy eyes, perhaps. It creates dry and chapped lips, and it facilitates dysregulation of body temperature. So again, going back to this body temperature issue. And then it allows odors, toxins, and noxious fumes to enter the lungs. All right, so that's the bit on breathing, which is why it's so important that you keep your clients breathing correctly. And then moving on, we get into the spinal movements. So those are your basic spinal movements. Oopsie, hold on, I've got a little issue here. So sorry, this thing is not behaving. Well, there we go. So here's your basic spinal movements. I generally use the spinal movements to warm up the spine. But in addition, when I very first work with a client and I come in and I'm going to look at their spinal movements, I always have them do at least two of each, because not only am I trying to warm up their spine, I'm also trying to assess where are they with their movement? What looks tight today? Where can I make some headway in today's session with them? Then we get on to the feet and ankle series. And the first thing I want to talk about is how complex the foot is. I absolutely love my feet. And I love my feet because they're so complex and they have to do so much to support everything else that I want to do in life. Now, a postural disequilibrium, so anything where you're off posture, it's always going to follow in a disease that affects the nervous system. So any kind of nervous system condition will always deteriorate posture. So we try to focus on the areas that maybe don't necessarily involve the nervous system. or can get some sort of stimulation without kind of like hacking the nervous system a little bit. And one of those things is your feet. So you want to stimulate the feet as much as possible to transmit the most clear information to the central nervous system, because the better your input information is, the better the output information will be. And if we look at the feet really quick, we've got fascia and 107 ligaments in the feet alone, 26 bones, 33 joints, 19 muscles and tendons. That's a lot going on in the feet. Let's talk about the neurosensory receptors first. So in the neurosensory receptors of the feet, these are predominantly in the plantar fascia. And the reason we like to train our clients barefoot is because there's so many neurosensory receptors in the toes and the soles of the feet, and we need to have that stimulation to get good input into the brain. If we look at the barefoot, there's a tremendous amount of neurosensory receptors in the toes in particular. And the big toe is really important because that's the one that really is an indicator to the brain for stability and to help with balance. If we look at all the different neurosensory receptors in the feet, there's different ones. And you can look at these names: Meissner's, Merkel's, Ruffini, and Pacini corpuscles. But the more important thing to note is that you have fast-acting neurosensory receptors and you have slow-acting neurosensory receptors. The fast-acting neurosensory receptors are things that can distinguish touch, even light touch. And if you look, they're closer to the surface of the skin. So if you can see my arrow here, that's the outside, the skin surface. And then as we start to come in, we hit the plantar fascia, and the Merkel's discs are really at the surface there, as are the Meissner's, which is fine touch and vibration. So what happens is, if you look, they're all connected to the same kind of like nerve. So once these are stimulated, it like triggers this nerve like a spider's web, and these ones wake up even more. It's kind of like they're more listening, right? And then the fast acting ones are 48%. So look at how much fast acting neurosensory receptors are on the feet. And then you go to the fast acting 2, which senses gross pressure and vibration. Those are the Pacini corpuscles. And then you have the slow acting 1 and 2, and these sense vibrations, heavy pressure and vibration and pressure and stretch. So they all sense different things, but all that information gathered together shoots up the afferent nervous system into the brain. And then the brain processes all of that and sends back down efferent signals to the rest of the body of what it needs to do to maintain balance and stability. So that's how important the feet are. So we start stimulating the feet. All of my clients have very strict instructions from the very beginning of my training with them that they have to roll out their feet every single morning. So either they're using a foot roller. I don't know if you can see something like this, or they're using a tennis ball or anything that can stimulate foot neurosensory receptors. And then this is just a quick slide on what the exercises are: the heel lift and lowers, the ankle plantar dorsiflexion, the circles in both directions. And then they can also do the same set in Pilates V. All right, then we get to the Pakwa set, which is mini set number 3. And on mini set number 3, this is a segment that's taken from a really old Chinese knowledge. And if I have to pick one set that's the most valuable of all of the mini sets, I would probably say this one, because look at the upper right corner. It hits upright posture, spinal mobility, it preserves ambulation and gait. So there's a lot of stuff happening with this one mini series alone. And if you have limited time, I would try to do this one. The other thing is you can extract from this set. So maybe you're only going to do head and neck and foot and ankle. You're not going to do the stepping pattern. I did that today. I focused on head and neck with one client, and then we did other things. So on the head and neck movements, these ones are very important because you're looking at not just improving neck mobility, but you're helping them to preserve their vestibular ocular reflex, which is stabilization of the gaze with the head movement. So the vestibular ocular reflex is a combination of the eyes, what the information that the eyes take in, plus the inner ear. So those two things combine and they take the information that's provided and they feed that into the brain. When the head moves, the natural tendency of the vestibular ocular reflex is for the eyes to kind of counter the movement. So if my head's going to turn to the right, my eyes will start to the left and then either go, or the eyes will purposely go if I'm directing them. Part of a good vestibular ocular reflex is if your neck is mobile, then you have a wider perspective or a wider view. You can see more, which gives you better stability and balance. The other thing is preserving cervico-ocular reflex. So the eye response that's elicited by rotation of the neck. So however, both of these work together, cervico-ocular reflex and the vestibular ocular reflex. And in addition, at the base of the occiput, across the back of the head and neck here, are many proprioceptors. So the more movement of the neck you have, the better amplitude of view that your client can have, and the more stability and balance that they can maintain. And then we know movements of the cervical spine are the same as the regular spine: flexion, extension, lateral flexion, transverse, and circular rotation. All right. And then what I want to show you also, hold on, I've lost everybody. Here we go. Okay, what I also want to show you is when you're doing the exercises with the head and neck in the beginning, especially if you have a client who's really stiff through the neck, you're going to do them two ways. So I will show you here. So let's say I'm going to do sagittal movement, down, center, up, center. First, I'm going to take the eyes with me, down, center, up, center. So I'll do the whole first round like that. Then the next round, I'm going to hold something bright. Usually like I'll hold a Sharpie that's colored or a highlighter, or I will cue them to sit in a chair or even stand and look at a specific object. And I will stand in front to watch that they're looking. So if I'm holding this, I'm going to do the movements with my eyes fixed on the object. Down, center, up, center. So my eyes will stay fixed on the object. And this is really important as well because you need to exercise the eyeball muscles. All right. And then we get into, these are the movements that you would see. Give me a sec. These are the movements that you would see on the Pakwa Sky mini series. That's for you to review. And it affects the Atlas axis all the way down to the T1. Then the next part of the Pakwa mini set is that you're doing a lot of scapular mobility and starting to train the scapula and the shoulder joint to work independently and to work coordinated. So there's a lot of shoulders and arm movements here. These benefits increasing the shoulder range of motion, stretching the pectoral muscles, which is really important because Parkinson's is very much so a forward flexion condition, activating deltoid muscles, anterior, the medial, and the posterior with all this arm stuff that you're doing. And then opening the thoracic cage. So you can read that little list there that's on the slide. I don't need to read all those for you, but just know that the more mobility they have with their arms, the better the proprioception is. So we all know that or maybe not, I'm going to remind you all, that proprioception is your understanding of where you are in space. So when you're able to have arm amplitude length, you have better proprioception. All right. And then they'll also, here's another really important thing, reducing compensatory movements involved with anterior head carriage. So this is really great for everybody. And I have to say that a lot of the clients with or without Parkinson's who start with that anterior head carriage, you can actually see as we do these movements, how the head starts to relax and it actually starts to come back into its proper position, right? Not 100% because this is already, the muscles have already kind of formed there, but to break it up a little to get their head back into the appropriate position where it's supposed to be. This is a slide that just shows you the movements. And then the last part of mini set number 3 is the gait reinforcement. So this is super cool. That's the stepping pattern forward and back. And this is really important because actually they're practicing gait without doing it, without actually moving. They're just stepping forward and stepping back. So they're practicing stance phase, swing phase, and they're also practicing balance, coordination, and they're getting their hip flexors to open. All right. Then we get to the 100. So on these slides, the various ways of doing the 100, this is the way for early stage. This is early stage. It's challenging, but the lengthened legs, of course, is very challenging. And the most challenging is prone. And this is where we want all our young onset who are fit or physically fit, or any clients that we have that are fit, we want them to be here. The stronger we make the back extensors, the longer they can stay there and their decline, their postural decline will be minimized. It'll take longer. Because remember, Parkinson's is a progressive condition. So the most that we can do is kind of slow it down so much that it seems like it's kind of frozen and they can stay in that stage for as long as possible. That is the biggest win that you can achieve with your clients. Let's say we've got, maybe it's early stage, but it's a 90-year-old person or an 87-year-old person. You can put them on their back. You can give them some cervical support. They can have their legs lengthened, but the head down. The one that I use a lot is the standing, and the standing is really key, especially from stage 2 on, especially if you've got a client whose primary motor symptom is postural instability and gait disorder. Standing is key because here they're actually they're having to stabilize under self-perturbation. So this is also going to help them in preventing falls and to feel more stable with their movements. It takes time to teach them. So I would suggest that you don't do the whole entire 100 first. Maybe start with half, and teach them the breathing pattern first and then the arm patterns. And then as we go along, let's say you're starting to get into mid to late stage. Most stable is sitting down. This pumping with the arms extended at shoulder height is very intensive on the core. So that one's challenging. This one, the version seated with a hinge, this is the one I probably use the least because I don't want them hinging. It's already hard enough to keep the back upright. So if I put them in a hinge, the tendency will be for them to start to collapse down. Okay. And then just really quickly, there is a study by Olson, Lockhart, and Lieberman. This came out in 2019. This is just to throw a little bit of a science reference in there. They did repeated perturbation training therapies, and they were shown to improve motor patterns in PD. So repeated perturbation training attempts to train individuals how to respond to unexpected perturbation by repeatedly eliciting such events on gait and posture in PD. In other words, if we keep forcing them to have to balance and stabilize under perturbation, they're going to be better at balancing and stabilizing in perturbation when they're out in the real world walking around. Okay. And then we get into mini set number 5, which is the cat cow. And this one, again, I don't know if you heard this, Gabriella. Paige asked, why do I have them start from the sacrum? Did you hear that question?
No.
Versus, Paige, can you repeat the question? Yeah, I know you said it was something about all the damage.
Yeah, I was just curious why, especially for someone with PD, you would cue leading the flexion from the tailbone as opposed to the head and tail moving together, and then the reverse for cow.
Does that make sense? Because there's
No.
different ways you can, sometimes you're cued to make your head and your tailbone kind of come down together and kind of look for your belly button type of thing.
Hmm.
I specifically cue to start from the tailbone and the sacrum and have that come down first and pull the rest of the spine into flexion. And I explained that the reason I do that is because they already generally, people with PD generally already have a lot more flexion through the middle to upper spine. And I want to create more awareness through the lower spine. It's the lower spine that needs more stimulation. So I start from there. All right.
I, Because I find I start from the lower part too, because most clients immediately go into hunchback.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So that's key right there too. You saw me do the rotation and I extended my arm. That is not usual. That's the full expression of that movement, but that won't be usual for your Parkinson's clients. What's going to be more common is number one, shoulder injuries. So that means limited rotation through the shoulder joint. But when you think about it, this movement is not about the shoulder joint, really. It's about the spine. We want rotation through the spine. So it really doesn't matter if they put their hand here, they put their hand on their chest, as long as they're rotating the spine and looking up to the ceiling. That's what you want. Okay. And then let's say we'll talk about this more as we start to progress through the stages, but just really quickly, maybe they don't have very good rotation here. They can do the rotation with their hands on a chair, standing legs apart, and they can rotate like that. And that will give them better mobility to get that reach and that twist through the spine. And then we go into the bent knee series. So on the bent knee series, this is a very important series to strengthen the hips and the lower trunk and the abs. And you can see here it goes both to upright posture and preserving ambulation and gait. I generally use this when I have clients who I see that their gait's starting to get tight or they're having kind of like a shuffling movement. I'll start to do a lot of hip mobility things, especially circles, opening inner thigh open and close where they're laying on their back. Maybe they've got their knees bent and their feet are on a raised surface like the couch or an ottoman or a step block or a regular Pilates box. And their feet and knees are together and then they just open them and they close them. Slow on the close, open and close. And I'll have them do that 8 to 10 times. And then I'll have them stabilize one, open only the right side, stabilize the right, open only the left, and then do both. So remember, always one side, then the other side, then both. Let's see what else. So you can read all the benefits there. Here's something important. If your client, let's say they're in mid stage, or let's say they can't get to the floor, you can do the entire series standing up with support. It's also good for clients who have like a dyskinesia where they're moving a lot. I usually put them to stand between two counters or two stable surfaces, one hand on each surface, and they can do these movements there, standing with support. Okay. And then here you can see the bent knee series, the second part, which is supine, and the focus is on pre-Pilates. So this is all pre-Pilates stuff. And then here's that thigh opener thing I was talking about. I use this a lot because when you start to see that the gait becomes tight and they start to shuffle a little, or their walking's a little slower, or you see any kind of discrepancies from a regular gait, you want to watch that the groin muscles, they'll tighten. So if you constantly are doing these open and close things, and this is an easy thing for them to do at home, it'll help keep the groin muscles a little bit more limber or flexible. I even encourage, today I gave this as homework and, explained how many he had to do. And I also explained to him, we need to keep your inner thighs and your groin muscles as pliable as possible because it will improve their gait. It will help them have better gait. And then we go into the bridges. So obviously the most important thing about the bridge is that it works the entire posterior chain. So from the heels all the way up to the back of the shoulders, the entire posterior chain is activated when you go into a bridge. So question, why would I pull a bridge out? What would be the most important thing I'm trying to focus on if I'm having the client do bridges in that session?
Strengthens our glutes.
Okay, glutes are important, yes. But what am I thinking in my head if I start to see if I'm using the bridge, I'm seeing something and it's concerning me, so I'm going to make sure they're doing bridges. What am I
So
seeing?
how that their chest is getting caved in, so you're trying to get them to open their chest.
Okay, and what category
Uh,
does that go to? Here's a clue. The answer is right on the slide at the top.
yeah, it goes to your posture, of course. Yeah.
Right. So that's how I need you to start thinking. I need you to start looking at the body, figuring out what of the three things am I seeing that's starting to not look right or not look like it's moving properly, right? What's going on for this session? As soon as I see that, it starts to give me information about where my focus of that session is going to be, right? So you really are not going to plan your sessions out way ahead of time. You kind of can't. You have to be able to learn how to walk in, look at what the person's bringing you, make a quick assessment, and determine where the focus is going to be for that session. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Right. So bridges, if they can't get to the floor and do bridges, sit to stand is the alternate option. This happened to me today. I had a client, his posture was looking a little bit slouchy, which it usually doesn't look like that. And so he, however, doesn't go to the floor a lot. So we did sit to stand with the core spring. So the core spring, you can use an elastic band. However, the core spring is much better. It's weighted. It's actually a heavier
Hmm.
spring and it's got handles. And so it gives you more solid feedback. And so, and we'll cover the core spring when we get to the exercise training modalities, but I have them do sit to stand and they raise that thing up and lift and open it. And that really gives them this beautiful, beautiful upright posture. So that's a really awesome way. Bridges are key for that. So bridges and extension are the best for a posture that's declining. Spine twist, improving spinal mobility. Now, if, again, making you think, why would I introduce a spine twist? What am I seeing that's making me think we got to get the spine moving here? What might I be seeing? Just, throw it out there. There's many different answers, but I want to see how you're thinking.
Tightness in
Well,
the
it
back.
moves. Yeah.
Yeah, could be tightness in the back. Right, right. Okay, what else?
It helps move that thoracic spine in a
Yes. Okay.
twisting you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
Yeah.
so it helps your mobility, your spine mobility.
And more,
Liberate,
go ahead, Gabby.
liberates the rib movement a little bit.
Yes, so all of those are true in terms of that transverse, transrotational movement, right? What am I
Mhm.
seeing that's making me think this person needs a little bit more transrotational movement? I'm seeing something that is not looking right. It's walking, walking.
Mm.
So when you think about the kinematics of walking, when one leg comes forward, the opposite shoulder also comes forward. It's like a twisting motion to walk, right? So if I see this person starting to walk like a robot, not only am I thinking we got to do some ambulation and gait stuff, I'm also thinking I got to get his spine to open up and to release because that's going to improve his gait. Remember what I said? It's stacked. Posture, spine, walking. All right. One other thing that I want to mention about the spine, and I don't want to get into all the research about this and all the stuff, but you want to think about the spine. The spine is housed within a canal or a cord, right? The cord, and it's all housed within cerebral spinal fluid. So this CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, it's propelled along a neuro axis. So as you're walking and this thing's twisting and it twists opposite, it's like this, right? So it's actually creating like a pumping mechanism or a way to circulate that spinal fluid better, right? Spinal twists are the same way. If your client's feeling really groggy and low energy, have them do a spinal twist, sit in the twist and breathe. I usually will do that maybe 2 or 3 breaths, come out, do the other side, 2 or 3 breaths. Guess what? Now the client's got a little bit more and they're a little bit more animated. So this is where things like if you've ever done yoga and you understand concepts of yoga, that kind of thing can play into how you program as well. Tere, you do a lot of yoga. So spine twists wake you up. Also, I want to talk about in terms of the spine twist. How many of you have done like myofascial meridian training or you know about the myofascial meridians? Anybody?
I know about meridians from a yin yoga training.
Okay. So throughout the body, this is
I
predominant.
have.
Yeah, we'll go into this more, but I'm just going to give you kind of like a quick drive-by on what this is. Throughout the body, there is fascia. So if you look at the slide and you see the thoracolumbar fascia here, this white stuff, this white stuff coats the entire body and it coats all the nerves, all the muscles, all the tissues. It's actually even a gelatinous substance that takes up all the space in the body. Okay. With this tissue, there have been findings that the tissue follows lines, and these are called myofascial meridians. And one of the lines is called the spiral line. So this would be very evident when you have a client and let's say they say, yeah, I have this chronic left shoulder pain and I don't know why, because I never hurt my left shoulder. And then you discover that they had a right hip injury 10 years ago, right? So this is that spiral line. It climbs the fascial tightness. It's all connected like a spider web. And these lines are connected even more. So if you have a pull on one side of the line, it's going to cross the body through the spiral line and affect the other side of the body. So when we are working with our clients and we're twisting with them, it's actually helping them to have better mobility on both sides of the body. And this would be best applied for people who have spinal asymmetry or scoliosis, lateral flexion and twisting. And by the way, if you have scoliosis or spinal asymmetry, you are automatically twisting to one side or the other because those two things go together, lateral flexion and rotation. So if they can laterally flex and rotate in one direction, we can use lateral flexion and rotation in the other direction to help them get out and get better mobility. the side bend. This is improving spinal mobility, automatically using the side bend if I see any kind of spinal asymmetry. And in fact, when I come in and I will generally see it, I will open. So we'll do inhale, arms up, extension, come down. Maybe I'll do 3, and then I'll say left arm only, up, left arm only, up, left arm only, up. Now laterally flex, turn out, look at the ceiling, come back, left arm down. Both arms up, both arms up, both, left again. So what I'm doing there is I'm trying to dig into that concave side and pull it open more. And you would be blown away. I mean, I even have family members who are standing there watching and their mouths just drop open and they're like, you're straight now. So there's so much you can do with just these tiny little things. It's just that people with PD don't really know what they're supposed to be doing, what they need to be doing so they can stay out of tightness, discomfort, pain, and just have better mobility. All right, we get to the lunge series. So the lunge is one of the 7 primal movements, and it's the foundation of ambulation and gait. I mentioned that a few times. Practicing the lunge daily will give them optimal balance. Now, let's say right now I'm working with a stage 3, and he can do lunges. He has to have them assisted generally, unless he's on a good day, then we really power through and do lunges without any support. But when he's having a wonky day and the lunge is not possible, you can back that up to a squat, because really a lunge is a split squat. So the squat is the easier movement. So you can have them squat center, feet together, squat open right 8 times, squat open left 8 times, squat alternating right to left 8 times, and then try the lunge. Okay, so that kind of progressive formatting, you will get faster and better results from them, and it'll help them to become stronger and more stable with their gait, with their walking. These are neurological components of gait and why the lunge is so important. Let me, I'm going to make this a little bigger here. All right, so it teaches stabilization and foot mechanics during the gait cycle. And this is important because weight is transferring in the body. Lunges have a high demand for stabilization, balance, coordination, and strength. And do you see he's on a TRX here? She's holding a counter. She's doing it independent with a prop in her hand. The lunge targets muscles, quads, hams, glutes, and it also works the abs and the back muscles. By the way, this client that's holding the prop, the magic circle, she was the one who, when we very first started together, she told me she had a personal trainer who does lunges with her, and she's the one who had the wonky lunge. Now look how beautiful her lunge is, and with a prop. So the lunge is so crucial because the way a person walks is a reflection on how the brain is projecting onto the muscular system. This is why we also train barefoot. If you notice, they all either have socks that have no toes or they're plain old barefoot. And we want to keep our clients walking and moving for as long as possible, because once they're not able to walk, it's going to start a spiral of other health issues, and that's going to facilitate a faster decline. One last thing that's really important about the lunge and walking is that your body weight has to feel the weight of the body against gravity. That's what feeds your proprioception and helps you with stability and balance. You have to be weight bearing when you're walking. So you have to be weight bearing when you're lunging. And sometimes if you can't weight bear independently, like this client, you can use support. So here she's got, look at the first two, the woman and the man in the center. She's holding the counter with one hand. He's holding a suspension trainer. Which of these two do you think is more challenging to stabilize? The single hand or the suspension trainer? Just take a
The
guess.
suspension?
The suspension trainer is more challenging. Yes. For that reason, as our clients start to decline in their stability, we start to introduce tools and props to help them stabilize. So if I have a client who's a bit wonky on an independent lunge, I'm not going to take her straight to the counter and let her start holding things. I don't want her holding things. I want her to stabilize as much as she can by herself. So a suspension trainer will provide just enough stability, but also it can provide a challenge because she still has to self-stabilize, because those two things are, the two hands will move. And then the last thing I'll do is I will put them onto single counter and then double counter if they're really unstable. We're looking at the mini set of extension now. So extension is the most important exercise, or I should say stretch, to strengthen the back extensors. And the thing about Parkinson's is that the natural progression of Parkinson's is that it is very much so a forward flexion condition. So your neurological system is degenerated, right? You have no dopamine to facilitate better movement and muscle activity. So things start to decline, and the decline is flexion. The decline is flexion predominantly because the start is flexion. When we are gestating in our mother's womb, the natural position is flexion, right? So we call this the primal curve. So from gestation, we're born, and it's our tonic muscles that form first to bring us into an upright posture. Okay. And then we develop extension. So if you look at a baby when they're tummy down on the crib, what are they doing? They're doing baby swan. Maybe that's why it's called baby swan, right? And they're lifting their head and they're reaching their arm and they're trying to look up and turn their head. So all of those things are part of developing extension and upright posture. So as PD goes along, posture starts to decline back to flexion. All right, let me scroll through here. Got one more here. So Parkinson's disease expedites the return to flexion. And as Parkinson's progresses, weight starts to shift forward, head drops, eyeballs drop. So remember the vestibular ocular system and the cervico-ocular system? If the head and the eyes are down, what is it telling the brain? Go down there. So that's what the body is going to adjust for. Once the body adjusts for this, you have a certain amount of time where now the new neural pathway for normal is down here. And then the head has to come up because the person has to see where they're going, right? So postural decline is directly related to the nervous system and brain function decline. So since we can't do anything about a lack of dopamine, we have to try and hack the system to preserve whatever we can. And one of those things is strengthening the back extensors to hold the posture upright. And then again, extension can be done standing, support from a chair, a counter, a wall. It doesn't really matter. You just need to get them to extend, right? Let's see what else. Anything else? You can read a lot of the stuff. Oh, PS, one other thing I want to talk about while we're going through training with your client is that they have to be drinking water throughout the session. You need to make sure that you keep them as hydrated as possible, even though the reality is whatever they're drinking now is not going to really go towards hydration during that session. It's going to be for hydration later because the body has to absorb it and et cetera, et cetera. But that's good because maybe they'll have longer lasting effects from their session with you. The cardio boost marching. These are, again, to get the heart pumping. You want them to march as quickly as possible. Pumping the arms up gives them more intensity. Once you try this yourself, you'll try it for 30 seconds, just as fast as you can, pumping your arms up. Your heart is going to be pounding. So in early stage, you want them to do both. As stages progress, they're going to sit down, they're going to pick arms or legs, or maybe they're going to do 15 seconds versus 30. Maybe they're going to do holding one hand on a counter while they pump with the other and march, and then they'll switch, they'll hold with the other, pump with the other hand and march. There's a lot of variations that you can do. All right, and that ends section 2.